Welcome back to Beyond the Battlefield. If your mind has been tired lately, not because you're lazy, but because you're carrying too much inside your work, this episode is for you. Because here's the strange thing. Some people are exhausted even after a small task. And some people carry enormous responsibility and still feel calm. So the question isn't only, how much are you doing? The real question is, what are you carrying while you do it? And Krishna doesn't talk like a motivational speaker. He talks like a surgeon. He cuts straight to the inner cause. In verse 11, he will show us a shockingly practical truth. You cannot step out of action. Even thinking is action. Even deciding is action. But then he reveals the hidden poison, the thing that quietly burns people from the inside. Attachment. And from there, verse 12 will show us two inner worlds, one where action produces peace, and one where the same action becomes bondage. And then verse 13. Krishna will use one of the most unforgettable metaphors in the entire chapter. He will call the body a city of 9 gates, meaning the city will keep running, but the resident doesn't have to collapse under it. So today, we're not learning how to do less. We're learning how to do without bleeding internally. Ankur, Krishna now speaks verse 11. And it feels like he's clarifying something very practical. Not philosophy, but how to actually live.
Yes, this verse is Krishna's instruction manual for action, not for monks, for people inside life.
The yogi performs action through the body, the mind, the intellect, and even the senses alone, but gives up attachment and acts only for inner purification.
So the first thing he makes clear is that action does not stop.
This is crucial. Krishna does not reduce action. He removes the inner knot.
And he lists everything: body, mind, intellect, senses. Why such detail?
Because people try to escape through loopholes. They say, I'm not acting physically. I'm only thinking. I'm only deciding. Krishna closes every escape.
So thinking is also action.
Yes, planning is action. Deciding is action. Perceiving is action. You cannot step out of karma.
But then Krishna adds something very specific. Sangam tyaktva, giving up attachment.
That is the heart of the verse. Not giving up work, giving up clinging. Clinging to outcomes, to identity, to this action must give me something. That inner demand is called Sangha. Attachment is not love for work, but dependency on result. Attachment is when action becomes personal survival, when results decide self-worth.
And then comes the final word. Atmashuddhiye.
For purification of the inner world, Krishna shifts the purpose of action from achievement to cleansing. Now action becomes a process, not a transaction. You act to clarify the mind, to reduce ego, to remove inner noise, not to complete the world.
This already feels different. Action without pressure. Effort without inner weight.
And this understanding is what Krishna will now use to explain burnout and also the danger of wrong renunciation.
So verse 11 is not about doing less, but about doing cleanly. Why work exhausts you, even when you love it? Ankur, something feels deeply relevant here. People today aren't afraid of work anymore. They're afraid of burning out.
Yes, and Krishna addresses burnout before the word even existed.
That's a strong claim. Because most people believe burnout happens due to overwork.
That belief is incomplete. Burnout is not caused by work. It is caused by attached work.
Attached work? What does that mean?
Every action carrying a hidden sentence. This must succeed. This defines who I am. If this fails, I fail. The exhaustion isn't physical, it's internal. The body can work, the mind can think, but the ego cannot carry outcomes endlessly. And that's where verse 11 enters. Krishna doesn't say, stop acting. He says, drop the attachment. Action remains. Clinging doesn't.
But Ankur, many people try to solve burnout by stepping back, by renouncing roles, by doing less.
That is the second mistake Krishna corrects. Wrong renunciation. What makes it wrong is when action stops but attachment stays. The body rests. The mind keeps working. The battlefield moves inside and becomes louder. Unexpressed action turns into restlessness. Suppressed responsibility becomes guilt. Escaped work becomes mental noise. And renunciation without maturity creates a deeper fatigue, that is internal burnout. Harder to detect, harder to heal. And Krishna's solution avoids both extremes. He keeps action. He removes the burden.
And then he says, Atma Shuddhaye, for inner purification.
Action is no longer for proving. It is for cleansing. Each decision removes confusion. Each effort reduces ego. Each task lightens the mind. The yogi works, but doesn't bleed internally. And that is why the yogi doesn't burn out. He doesn't carry the fruit home.
This changes the way we look at leadership. Not less responsibility, but cleaner responsibility.
Leadership without attachment. Work without ownership. Effort without inner violence.
So, verse 11 is not spiritual advice. It's survival wisdom. Because Krishna isn't asking us to escape work, he's teaching us how to stay alive while doing it. Ankur, in verse 11, Krishna showed us how to act without attachment, for inner purification. And now in verse 12, he shows us what that inner posture produces.
Yes, verse 11 was instruction. Verse 12 is consequence. Krishna says,
The integrated one, renouncing the fruit of action, attains established peace. But the unintegrated one, driven by desire, attached to results, becomes bound.
this is a psychological comparison. Two inner states, same world.
Let's slow down there. What does renouncing the fruit actually mean?
First, what it does not mean. It does not mean ignoring consequences, avoiding responsibility, refusing compensation, acting carelessly. And it's not irresponsibility. Renouncing the fruit means you perform action sincerely. You accept results calmly. You do not base your identity or emotional stability on the outcome.
So renunciation here is internal.
The action continues. The clinging drops. And then Krishna promises peace, not temporary relief, not distraction, not suppression. He says, Nashtikim Shanti, established peace. It means success does not inflate you, failure does not collapse you, comparison does not disturb you. Future anxiety reduces because peace is no longer dependent on the fruit.
So peace shifts from what will happen to I have acted rightly. And the second type, the ayuktaha?
He acts with desire. Desire here doesn't mean normal preference. It means acting because you need a result. Acting because your ego demands validation. Acting because your worth depends on success. And what happens next when desire drives action is the mind constantly moves toward the future. Anxiety increases, fear of loss grows, competition intensifies.
And Krishna says, Nibadyate. He becomes bound.
Bound to expectation, insecurity, disappointment, pride, frustration. And bondage isn't chains, it's psychological dependence. And what Krishna really revealing here is a universal law. Attachment converts action into bondage. Non-attachment converts action into freedom. Bondage is not physical chains. It is emotional dependence. Freedom is not inactivity. It is emotional independence within activity.
Let's see this in leadership.
Two leaders, same board pressure. Leader 1 acts clearly, prepares fully, decides carefully. But his peace does not depend on quarterly applause. That is yukta. And the other, he needs the market reaction. He needs validation. He needs victory. That is Kamkaran. So one leads and the other survives.
This feels like chapter 2 returning.
Yes. 2.47 said, Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachan. You have the right to action, never to its fruits. Chapter 2 gave the instruction. Chapter 5 explains the psychological outcome.
Ankur, something feels different between chapter 2 and chapter 5. In 2.47, Krishna says, detach from the fruit, just act. But now in chapter 5, he says act for atmashuddhaye, for purification of the self. Has the teaching changed?
No, the teaching hasn't changed. Arjuna has. In chapter 2, Arjuna is collapsing. He is emotionally overwhelmed. He wants to escape action. So Krishna gives him the most stabilizing principle first. Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachan. You have control only over action, not the fruit. So chapter 2 is emergency medicine. It prevents paralysis. It prevents escape. It prevents fruit obsession. Krishna is not talking about ego dissolution yet. And then chapter 3 shifts again. In chapter 3, Krishna introduces Lok Sangrah. You must act to sustain social order. You act because others depend on you. You act so that the world does not fall into disorder.
So first stability, then responsibility.
Exactly. In chapter 2, detach from fruit to steady your mind. In chapter 3, act for the welfare of the world. And now in chapter 5, now Krishna turns inward. In 5.11 he says, act without attachment for Atma Shuddhaye, for purification of ego. Now action is no longer just duty, not just social responsibility. It becomes inner refinement. And then 5 0.12 completes the arc. If you renounce fruit, you gain established peace. If you act from desire, you become bound.
So, by chapter 5, Krishna is not just preventing escape, he is transforming motivation. A beginner works for reward. A responsible person works for society. A mature person works for inner freedom.
So Krishna didn't change his teaching. He unfolded it. Arjuna grew. And the teaching deepened. So chapter 2 stabilized the warrior. Chapter 3 made him responsible. Chapter 5 makes him inwardly free. And that is the full evolution of Karma Yoga.
The embodied beings who are self-controlled and detached reside happily in the city of 9 gates, free from thoughts that they are the doers or the cause of anything.
That sounds radical.
It sounds radical because we misunderstand renunciation. Krishna does not say stop acting. He says renounce mentally. So let's understand what is being renounced. The sense of I am the ultimate doer. The ego claim over action. The action continues, but ownership softens.
Ankur, why does Krishna suddenly call the body a city of 9 gates? Why not just say, body?
Because body sounds passive. A city is alive, busy, complex. And that is exactly what the body is. So the metaphor is intentional. A city has entrances, traffic, communication, administration, movement in and out. Your body is the same. And the 9 gates, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, 1 mouth, 2 lower openings. Through these gates, the world enters. And expression leaves. So perception flows in and reaction flows out. And Krishna says, the self dwells in this city. The resident lives in the city, but is not the city.
That changes identity.
Exactly. Normally we say, I see, I hear, I speak, I act. But Krishna reframes it. The gates function, the senses operate, the mind processes, nature moves, the resident witnesses. So when Krishna says, neither acting nor causing action, he is not denying activity. He is dissolving ego doership. In a city, roads move traffic, markets operate, systems function. The king does not manually push every cart, but we behave as if we are pushing every cart. And that creates the burden. If you believe, I caused everything, I control everything, I am responsible for every outcome, you will carry pride, you will carry guilt, you will carry fear. But if you see yourself as the resident, responsibility remains. But psychological heaviness drops. Krishna isn't reducing action, he is reducing ego, and the city keeps functioning. The gates open, the senses engage, life moves, but the resident rests.
That's why he says, dwells happily. When you stop identifying with the infrastructure, you stop collapsing under its activity. So the body is a city. Nature runs it. The self witnesses it. And that realization is inner freedom. But Krishna says neither acting nor causing action. That feels contradictory.
It is only contradictory if we confuse levels. At the physical level, action happens. At the psychological level, intention happens. But at the level of pure awareness, there is witnessing.
So he's not denying activity. He's denying ego doership. This reminds me of chapter 3.
Yes, Prakriteha kriyamanani gunaiha karmani sarvashah. All actions are performed by the qualities of nature. That was chapter 3 verse 27. In chapter 3, Krishna said, nature acts through the gunas, but the deluded self thinks, I am the doer. Chapter 3 explained the mechanism and chapter 5 internalizes it. In chapter 3, Krishna corrects arrogance. In chapter 5, he dissolves the burden of authorship. If you believe, I cause everything, I control everything, I am responsible for every outcome, you will carry guilt, fear, pride, anxiety. But if action is seen as nature functioning, then responsibility remains. But psychological heaviness drops.
So, living in the city of 9 gates happily means you operate through the body. You engage the world. But I am not limited to this structure. And then, action becomes participation, not possession. But couldn't someone misuse this teaching?
Yes, if misunderstood, it becomes laziness. But Krishna already prevented that in chapter 3. You must act. You must uphold order. You must fulfill duty. Verse 13 in chapter 5 is not about escape. It is about inner lightness.
So Krishna is not reducing responsibility. He is reducing ego. And that changes everything. So if we had to hold today's episode in one image, it would be this: a city. The gates are open, work is moving, responsibilities are entering, outcomes are leaving. And Krishna isn't asking you to shut the city down. He's asking you to stop living like you are the city. Verse 11 gave us the method: action without clinging for inner cleansing. Verse 12 gave us the consequence: drop the fruit and peace becomes established. Chase the fruit and the same life becomes bondage. And verse 13 gave us the deepest relief: the resident can rest, even while the city functions. So if you're tired tonight, don't only ask, how much did I do? Ask, what did I cling to while I did it? Because the work may be necessary, but the suffering is often optional. Thank you for being with us on Beyond the Battlefield. If this episode made you pause, share it with someone who is doing a lot and silently carrying more. Subscribe and leave us a review. It helps this message reach the people who need it. And you can write to us at beyondthebattlefield@outlook.in. Also, check the GPT companion link in the description. Until next time, keep acting, but act cleanly.